What we're seeing is it's a manufactured crisis, and then they have all these solutions ready to go, and we can probably dig into that with the central bank digital currency. That Richard Lindzen has said that something about if you can control CO2, you can control everything about our lives. And they for sure want to reduce the amount of meat that you buy in a month and the number of times you fly and the type of car you drive, and just they want to control everything based on this whole idea that CO2 is causing bad weather. But that whole basis, we need to go back to the basic problem is that there is no climate crisis. It's all a crock, and nothing that we do, none of this control, all of this money spent, none of it's going to prevent any bad weather at all in 2075 or ever. So the whole thing, we need to push back hard against the whole thing.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. The Bitcoin time chain is 867193, and the value of one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. Today's episode is Bitcoin Talk, where I talk with my guest about Bitcoin and whatever else comes up. And today, that guest is Tom Nelson. Tom is a climate and energy realist and the producer of Climate, the movie. Tom and I get into a bunch of rabbit holes today, from the climate narrative to government control and CBDCs, subsidies creating market distortions, the intellectual elites and their role in pushing government narratives, energy, human flourishing, Bitcoin mining, and a whole lot more. Before we dive in, do me a favor and subscribe to the Bitcoin Podcast wherever you're watching or listening. Give the show a boost on Fountain if you find it valuable, and if you're not listening to it on Fountain, what are you doing? You can earn Bitcoin just for listening to the show. Check out bitcoinpodcast.net for episodes and additional resources. Head to the show notes to grab links for my sponsor Bitbox and other partners, or go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker for 5% off. And send an email to hello@bitcoinpodcast.net if you have feedback or if you're interested in sponsoring the Bitcoin Podcast. Without further ado, let's get into this Bitcoin Talk with Tom Nelson. I'm still very new to this whole live streaming game, but I figure, it's a nice way to interact with folks on Nostr, and
Yeah.
I kind of like, I've gotten just, I don't know, YouTube is not my favorite platform. I hate the fact that you seem to have to kind of like whore yourself out to the algorithm, so to speak. And it just, I don't know, something about it just rubs me the wrong way. And so if I'm going to live stream, I'm going to do it on Nostr only. So,
by the way, do we have restrictions on we shouldn't swear or mention anything that's not YouTube friendly?
Oh no, fuck that. Yeah, we can swear, we can mention anything. I figure it's only a matter of time before YouTube decides to remove me for daring to swear too much and saying other things that probably go against their community guidelines, which is quite easy to do. I'm sure you've probably run afoul of that.
I have
a time or two.
I was interested though. Efrat just did something that got left up on YouTube, but she said that the vax is poison, and she was using the F word and stuff, and whatever. YouTube left it up for at least 3 days, 3 days.
Wait, it's still up, or they took it down after 3 days?
No, it's still up after maybe 2 days. It's still up. It doesn't have a lot of views, but I thought the algorithm immediately, if you call it poison, that you're off, but I guess not.
Well, right. They generally don't tend to like that. I mean, I don't know. I know I don't know if you know the Simply Bitcoin guys. They got deplatformed from YouTube. I think this was probably about a month ago, a little over a month ago now. And they pretty much stick to Bitcoin and, maybe some other things that could potentially be deemed conspiracy theories, or maybe it's talking negatively about the Federal Reserve that gets you in hot water. I don't know. But it seems like their community, that's the thing about those community guidelines and terms and conditions. They're however many hundreds of pages long. Nobody's ever going to read all of them. And they can guaranteed twist something that says, oh, you broke it in this way.
100%.
And it's like, it's guilty until proven innocent. It's like, you've got to submit the appeal. You've got to go through it. But that's why I'm grateful places like Nostr exist, because there's no one to say, hey, that goes against our community guidelines. It's like there are no community guidelines. So
I love that. Yeah.
Tough shit. But Tom, thanks for coming on here. I've followed you for a number of years on the platform formerly known as Twitter, on X. And so it was great to connect with you. I think after I released the show with Efrat, because I know you know Efrat, she's a great connector of people, I think. But it's great to have you here on the show. Again, been following your work. You've been doing it for quite a while. I've probably only followed for maybe it was when I started going down the rabbit hole of, a lot of this climate quote science stuff doesn't make a lot of sense. I need to find some people who seem to be more realistic and honest about this so that I can dig deeper into this.
Yeah. I've been podcasting for just over 2 years. And before that, way before that, I was on Blogspot and I was on just Twitter mostly for quite a while. So yeah, I've been digging into this whole climate thing for, I don't know what, it's approaching 20 years now.
Yeah, that's longer than I've been digging into it. You know, I'd love to just kind of to start out a little bit with just a simple question. So for folks that don't know you, just who are you? How did you get here today to be, I believe you classified as a climate and energy realist and a Bitcoiner. What was your path here?
Yeah, so I would say until maybe 2005, I was a total normie where I would just believe whatever the TV told me. I'm so embarrassed looking back that whatever. I've changed my opinions on many things now that I've looked into stuff for myself. But in 2005, I was a bird watcher, and there was this big announcement in 2005 that the ivory-billed woodpecker had been rediscovered. It was a huge woodpecker, bigger than a pileated, and they had rediscovered it down in Arkansas. And there was a peer-reviewed paper with 17 authors, and it got tons of publicity. It was on NPR, and when people heard about it, they were overcome with emotion, and they pulled off to the side of the road and cried and stuff. And the whole thing was bullshit, 100%. I checked into it, and it was amazing amounts of groupthink that people just saw something fly by, and they thought it was an ivory bill. And they had a picture of it, and it was 6 pixels. It was 2 blacks and then 2 whites and 2 blacks. That's it, 6 pixels. And they're going, hey, this is our proof of an ivory bill. Completely insane. And when I pushed back against it, people would say, hey, you're not an ornithologist. Who are you to push back against this? But I did this on Blogspot. I pushed back, and it became a place where a lot of people in the comment section were pushing back, saying this is crazy. They didn't see it. So that was the whole my introduction to peer-reviewed science being total bullshit. So right at that time, some guy emailed me, and he said, I've followed this controversy, and I'm following the global warming controversy. You should check into that one. So I did. He said, again, if you look into the data for yourself, you're going to find out that it doesn't back up the narrative at all. And I did. As I looked into it, you can go down any rabbit hole you want, global warming-wise, and the data doesn't back up the climate crisis at all. There's nothing there at all. It's pretty amazing.
Well, I did not expect woodpeckers to be your entrance to these very dangerous and troublesome conspiracy theories, as they would be labeled. But so, where along that journey did you end up finding Bitcoin? Because I only discovered you were also a Bitcoiner more recently, and I was like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense. Also, that it was not terribly surprising, but I was glad to see it.
Yeah, I guess I didn't tell you my whole journey. I stopped it in about 2006. But
let's keep it going.
I worked on the ivory bill for a while, and then I started switching over. I got bored with that and switched over to the climate change thing. And just for a long time, I was just aggregating stuff. I was just reading everything using Google News and stuff and aggregating all these crazy claims. And what I started doing is just going down to each rabbit hole. Like for a while, the big thing was CO2 or climate change was really bad for polar bears. So I checked into that, and that's totally not true. That there's way more polar bears now than there were in the 70s, way more. And a way bigger factor is hunting. We're still killing maybe 900 polar bears per year with legal hunting, just shooting them. And that's because there's plenty of them, and we can shoot that many, and we still are not going to make them go extinct. The whole idea that it's too warm for polar bears and that they're in trouble in any way because of CO2, it's a total crock. And I went down every rabbit hole, like with crop yields. You can look at wheat yields and corn yields around the world, and they're going up and to the right constantly. And more warmth and more CO2 is for sure, it's good for crop yields. So that's a total crock. But you can look at cyclones, and you can look at hurricanes, droughts, floods, anything. You're constantly seeing to this day, anytime there's bad weather somewhere, we're supposed to think that the weather's getting worse, CO2 caused it, there's a climate crisis, and we have to print more money to do all this green energy crap in order to prevent bad weather in 2050. The whole thing is a crock. And as I say, catastrophic human-caused global warming is the most massive scientific fraud in human history. It is. There's been some other ones recently, virus related. But yeah, it's just a massive fraud. It's enormous amounts of groupthink. I think a lot of people that are pushing this actually believe in it. But if you're just an ordinary person, you have access to Google and you can look up some stuff for yourself. As you dig into it, you're going to find out it is a crock. And part of the reason why I enjoy pushing back is it's so easy pushing back, because they're constantly making claims, and you can spend 2 minutes and find out that it's a crock. So then I did this for many years, and then at some point, both Marty Bent and Safety, somehow they were following me, and they both invited me on their podcast. So that was absolutely my introduction to Bitcoin. I didn't know who Safety was. I'm sorry to say.
It's quite an intro as far as people to introduce you to it. That's pretty.
Didn't know who Marty
nice.
Bent was. But yeah, I went on their podcast and I started thinking, well, maybe I should look into this. And I did. I read Safety's book and I started listening to the podcasts and digging into it. And I put a lot of hours into it. I think Michael Saylor says you should put in 100 hours. I put in way more than that. And at some point, I started tiptoeing into it and getting more and more into it. And Efrat Fennickson has been a big influence on me. She's introduced me to lots of people. I think I ended up talking to you because she was on your podcast. Yep. So yeah, I've been to a couple conferences now, and I have a few contacts in the Bitcoin world now. I'm just totally loving it. Every time I have a free time now, very often I'm listening to Bitcoin podcasts and digging into it, digging into the whole money printing thing, and I'm kind of waking up on a lot of issues now.
Well, it's perfect that you bring up money printing, because I think that this is one of those, when we look at let's say the climate science industry, because that's really what it is, right? It's an industry that is made up of both intellectuals and an army of consultants and lobbyists and companies that are profiting massively from all of this. And all of this is basically, the majority of this, the tech that is put out there, or, supposed to be put out there, is funded by government subsidies. Like, so much of it is government grants to the academics, government subsidies to the companies. You look at the massive numbers that they're throwing out there, and that all just comes down to bloated monetary supply leading to bad incentives, right? Because when there's easy, cheap money out there that you just have to say a few magic words and you can get your hands on a piece of that sweet pile of cash, well, you'd be stupid not to, right? I mean, I wouldn't, just because I would want to try and be truthful. But I think you're right that some people, of course, genuinely believe what they are selling. Other people, I think, know exactly what they are doing and that they are being dishonest. And so I want to. There's a lot to dig into on there. I think one of the most interesting things to me is that it seems that always capitalism is blamed. Capitalism is the boogeyman. Free markets are the boogeyman. And so the only solution is for governments to step in to subsidize the good industries, to punish the bad ones. And it doesn't matter if you're, John Smith in the Rust Belt. We're going to tell you probably shouldn't have a gas stove because that's bad for the climate. I guess when you start talking to people about this who may be skeptics, or I should say skeptics of the skeptics, how do you actually begin this conversation? Because it's quite it's a heated topic for a lot of people, because so much of the literature out there is treated as dogma. Like, there's a consensus, the science is settled. If you even dare to bring up a question, you're clearly anti-science, you're against the climate, you want to burn the planet down, you bad person.
Yeah, what I like to do is just look at specific examples, at actual data. Like right now, there's nice weather in October, and you see people on Twitter going, oh no, I'm wearing shorts in October. When I was a kid, I remember it was cold in October. I just saw that in the last hour or so. But all you have to do is look at the data. So I looked up the data here for Minnesota, where I am, and all the records here for the last 12 days of October, all of them were set before the year 2000. A lot of them were set in 1955 or whatever. So I think looking at that historical data is so important, because it was really warm in the past. In the U.S., for sure, it was way warmer in the 1930s than it has been since then, for whatever reason. Again, in Minnesota, in the 1930s, 1940s, it hit 100 degrees here or higher 38 times. And since 1988, it's more like 8 times total since then. It just hasn't gotten that warm for whatever reason. So this whole idea that warm weather right now proves anything or a storm right now proves anything, it absolutely doesn't. And a guy that's really good to listen to is Tony Heller. He's Tony Climate on X. And he has, for years, he's been digging into old newspaper clippings, et cetera, and just looking at how bad the weather was and how hot it was in the past. So the only way you can panic about what's happening now is if you don't know what happened in the past. So I think it's very key to just look at what's happened in the past, and that's going to make people, I think anybody who listens to you will not panic if they realize how bad the floods and the droughts, et cetera, were in the past. So many horrible things have happened in the U.S., like the Peshtigo fire happened in 1871. Horrible fire. Nothing like that has happened since then. The Galveston hurricane in 1900, again, it killed maybe 8,000 people. Nothing like that has happened in the U.S. since then. So, yeah, I think that's the most important thing. Just look at the data. You don't have to understand atmospheric physics. You don't have to be a climatologist. Ordinary person looking at the data, you can figure out there's nothing there.
If you want to protect yourself from totalitarian CBDCs, you need unconfiscatable money, i.e. Bitcoin. But Bitcoin on an exchange isn't really yours. So go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker for 5% off the easy-to-use, fully open-source Bitcoin-only BitBox02 hardware wallet from Bitbox Swiss. Then get your Bitcoin off the exchange and into your own self-custody. I love working with the Bitbox team because they build easy-to-use, secure, open-source solutions to keep your Bitcoin safe. And not only is the Bitcoin in your Bitbox safe from totalitarian government confiscation, let's say, but Bitbox is also one of the only 2 hardware wallets to actually address the Dark Skippy vulnerability. And again, I cannot emphasize this enough, but the BitBox02 is easy as hell to use. Whether you are brand new to Bitcoin and it's your first time setting up a hardware wallet so you're a little bit nervous, or you are a well-seasoned psychopath. It is Bitcoin only, and again, fully open source. You can head to their GitHub and verify for yourself. Don't trust me or Bitbox. When you go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker, not only do you get 5% off, but you also help support this podcast. So seriously, thank you.
Well, and I think therein comes the role of the academics, right? The paid academics who are funded and get all this research money because they say the right things and they have a preordained consensus that they, it's not that they're searching for an answer, it's that they have the answer and they're searching for the information to back up the answer, right?
Yeah.
But that's their role, basically, is we are manufacturing crisis, and this goes across all aspects, not just related to weather and climate, but it's manufacture crisis, manufacture consensus, and then manufacture a state of control. And that state of control is very real as opposed to the crisis and the consensus. And so is this kind of what you've seen happening? Is there any trend away from this in the academic world that you've seen, or is it still largely captured?
That's a great question. I mean, for sure, that's what we're seeing is it's a manufactured crisis, and then they have all these solutions ready to go, and we can probably dig into that with the central bank digital currency. That Richard Lindzen has said that something about if you can control CO2, you can control everything about our lives. And they for sure want to reduce the amount of meat that you buy in a month and the number of times you fly and the type of car you drive, and just they want to control everything based on this whole idea that CO2 is causing bad weather. But that whole basis, we need to go back to the basic problem is that there is no climate crisis. It's all a crock, and nothing that we do, none of this control, all of this money spent, none of it's going to prevent any bad weather at all in 2075 or ever. So the whole thing, we need to push back hard against the whole thing. But in terms of the academic world and publishing, there are tons of papers that are published every year right now that push back against this. There's a site, I can give you the link later, but there's hundreds of papers each year. There's a guy that compiles those. And many academic papers don't support this at all. The whole idea is that there's supposed to be this 97% consensus, and if you look in the peer-reviewed literature, you'll find out that there's a climate crisis. You won't find that either. There's no paper at all that says that there's a climate crisis and here's why. And there's no paper that proves that CO2 is the climate control knob. So if we crank up CO2, we know what the temperature is going to be. There's no paper at all that proves that because it's not even true. So, yeah, if you dig into this, you'll find out that even in the peer-reviewed literature, there's no backing for any of this fear.
Where did the arrival at CO2 being the climate control knob, where did that come from? Because I think like we can all agree that, like pollution is bad, right? Like,
Yes.
like nobody wants pollution, but I think that sort of gets lumped in with any sort of industrial activity, that produces CO2 is bad, and any sort of energy, usage that produces CO2 is bad. And by the way, you, human being who produce CO2, you're bad. Like, where did the CO2 thing actually come from? Where they started looking at it and saying, nope, CO2 is what we have to focus on. That's the thing. As opposed to like, why isn't a bigger deal made of methane? Why did CO2 get this gold star of approval?
Okay, yeah, there's many parts of that question. I want to answer all the parts. I think people say there's a guy named Maurice Strong that maybe in the 1980s or so, he was the one that was kind of searching for a problem that they could use to get this globalist control of us all. So that may be one of the first times when this was really pushed on us in the 1980s. There's Jakob Nordengård from Europe. He's been on my podcast a couple times, and he's done, I think, the best job of really digging into the origin of this whole thing. Like, where did this really come from? And I think he points to the Rockefellers and Maurice Strong. And at some point, Al Gore seized on the whole thing. That was quite a bit later. But there's a new movie by Joel Gilbert that just came out about Al Gore that's talking about how Al Gore seized on this thing as a way to get political power, etc. Al Gore wasn't interested in this subject at all until he found out he could use it politically. And I think, from my perspective, there was a big push, a big resurgence of this scam when An Inconvenient Truth came out around 2006 or 7 or so. I think if you look at Google searches, Google Trends, you can see that people were really into this whole alleged scam right around then. A lot of people I've talked to said, I watched that movie and my mind was blown. I believed it, and I believe there was a crisis. A lot of people who are big-time skeptics now saw the movie back then, and they believed it at first. Like, I kind of even believed it at first that CO2 was a problem. So a lot of us have believed and then looked into the data for ourselves and found out it's not a problem. But in terms of CO2 being pollution, there's about 425 parts per million CO2 in the air right now. And you and I are exhaling about 40,000 parts per million, about 100 times that. So when you're talking to your plants in your house, you're giving them a little extra CO2, and the CO2 is great for the plant. It's not pollution at all. It's a key to photosynthesis. Will Happer says that the CO2 in a growing cornfield in the summer, it might be 425 in the morning when the corn starts waking up and starts doing photosynthesis. It might be 200 parts per million a little later, just a few hours later, because the corn is just feeding off the CO2. It's incredibly important. So the whole idea that it's a pollutant or that it's black smoke coming out of a smokestack, we're supposed to think that's carbon pollution, but it's not. It's CO2 is invisible, it's harmless, it's colorless. And this whole fight against CO2 is like fighting oxygen or water, just completely crazy. And to spend $40 trillion and give up our freedom for this, whatever, it is a massive scam.
I want to dig into kind of some of the numbers around this too, and go down that path of CBDCs as well, because that's, I think, a huge part of this. But before, I want to double back a little bit, because I recently watched the movie that you produced, Climate, the movie, aptly named. And, one of the things that you guys showed a chart in there that was basically showing that, if CO2 was in fact the climate control knob, you would expect CO2 rising to precede temperature rising. But in fact, if you look at all of this data you're looking at all these ice core samples, data over millions of years, temperature rises first, and then CO2 goes up. Do I have that correct?
You do have that correct. Yeah, and it is very complicated, but the theory is that when the temperature goes up, that the ocean's warm, and they can't hold as much CO2, so they slowly start outgassing CO2. So the warmth happens first, then as the CO2 comes out of the ocean, then the CO2 goes up second. So again, this whole cause and effect thing is wrong. And the whole idea that we can tweak CO2 and make stuff happen, we can't. That's not how it works at all. It's not how it works.
Yeah, the thing with all that ice core data is kind of mind-blowing, just because that would seem to be such an obvious refutation of CO2 being the climate control knob based on actual empirical data. that it's like you don't see that talked about very often, though. I don't. Maybe there's a few academic papers about it, but probably not the ones that are getting published in Science magazine and Nature magazine and those kind of those lauded places.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that just that blows the whole thing out of the water. Just that. There's so many other ways to blow it out of the water. But then you don't even have to go to ice cores. You can just look at the real temperature data for the 20th century even. And you can see it warmed from 1910 to 1940s, in the 1940s. Then it cooled. So after World War II, as we had industry really cranked up, we emitted a lot of CO2. For 30 years, we emitted enormous CO2, and the climate went the other way. It cooled quite a bit for 30 years. Then after that, it went up. So even in the 20th century, there's no correlation. CO2 for sure wasn't the climate control knob even in the 20th century. So it just doesn't work. And even starting in maybe 97 or so, we had what they called a hiatus, where for maybe 14 years or something, for whatever reason, we emitted enormous amounts of CO2 then, and the temperature didn't go up. So even then, that correlation didn't hold. So there's no reason to expect it will hold for the rest of this century. I think we're going to continue burning fossil fuel, and CO2 is going to continue to go up, I think. But I think the temperature on Earth is going to fluctuate up and down. I don't know where, I don't know, I can't predict it. But it always has gone up and down on many different cycles, short-term cycles, long-term cycles. Sometimes the cycles line up and it gets really warm. Sometimes the cycles line up the other way and it gets really cold. You can't really predict it ahead of time. But my prediction for the rest of the century is it's going to be warm, it's going to be cold, it's going to fluctuate. It's just not going to, we can't just, if we know the CO2, we're not going to know the temperature because, again, that's not how it works.
It's interesting, too, because it seems to me that there's a lot of hubris involved here.
Yes.
Where people think that, yes, we have figured out this magic control knob for the climate. And we, as the anointed intellectuals, are, of course, smart enough to be able to figure out just how to fine-tune that control knob. And if we just issue enough carbon credits and if we just geoengineer enough, and maybe we put a bunch of sulfur dioxide out into the atmosphere, and maybe we just block out the sun for a little while, what's the worst that could happen? And we'll save humanity. Thank goodness, and give us a Nobel Peace Prize for all of this. Meanwhile, you have this giant ball of fire that gives us all life and warms us out there the sun goes through solar cycles, right?
Yes.
And can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's something that people don't understand, these solar minimums and solar maximums, and the fact that, again, you've got this giant ball of fire that from an unimaginably far distance away can literally burn your skin. And yet people are like, no, that can't be the cause of any of this warming. It can't possibly be these massive flares coming out.
Yeah, one interesting thing is that the activity on the sun seems to have a major impact on the cloudiness on Earth. It's very complicated, but there's cosmic rays coming in here, and they affect the amount of clouds that are forming. And everybody on both sides of the debate, they admit that clouds are a huge unknown. We don't really understand them. They're incredibly hard to model. But for sure, we can see that the solar activity affects clouds, and that probably is a way bigger impact on the temperature than anything that we're doing. So cloudiness is very important. Solar activity is very important, and there's cycles in sunspots, and sometimes the sun's very quiet, and we have things maybe a minimum where people say that a minimum in solar activity caused a cold period in Europe where you could have ice fairs on the Thames. The ice, I think, got to be 11 inches thick on the river in London there. Back when there was low solar activity, it got really cold. And since then, I think maybe the last time the ice was there was maybe in the late 1800s. Anyway, changes in the sun affected a lot. And the sun has been very active lately, coinciding with this warm period that kind of peaked recently. And I think Willie Soon would agree, and many other people on my podcast would agree that this modern solar maximum is probably a major reason for the recent warmth we've had. But I like to say that the recent warmth we've had, it's not a bad thing at all. We're supposed to think that we really want to cool the planet because our lives would get better if we went back to the temperatures in 1850. But that is a total crock, too, because if you read up what happened during the Little Ice Age, which happened a couple hundred years ago or a little more, life was not good on Earth. People were having to eat things that weren't food because there were short growing seasons, and it was a lot harder to care for your family during cold periods. And there's a reason why all through human history they've called warm periods optimums, because warmth is better for life on Earth. That doesn't mean we want the oceans to boil. That's too warm. But all the fluctuations we've had in the last 10,000 years or more, warmth has been way better than cold. And there's been times in the past where the glaciers were advancing on churches in Europe, and people were praying that the glaciers would stop advancing before they got down to the church. So there's been times of glaciers advancing and retracing, and nothing we do causes that, of course, but I think there's no reason to believe that they're not going to advance again. And right where I'm sitting right now, not that long ago in geological time, in time periods, there was 1 mile of ice over the top of here. 1 mile of ice over the Chicago area. So those times are probably coming back at some point. I don't think we can prevent it, but it happens. Ice ages come and go, and CO2 is not the driver of them.
Well, that little ice age that you mentioned, that kind of that little medieval ice age, I think people forget that what was a big product that came out of that was literal witch hunts.
Yes.
The witch hunts literally came because they thought that the witches were making the crops fail and were making it colder and were making life just miserable for them and were leading to famine. It was not, in fact, the witches, because they weren't witches. But I think that this is such an interesting parallel that you see. Now we kind of have, it seems that we're doing the witch hunt in advance of any crisis. It's like we're running ahead of ourselves. Usually human beings wait until the crisis and then they go after, the quote witches for daring to blaspheme the weather gods and creating this ice age. But now it seems that the witch hunt is happening in advance. And I suppose it's the manufactured crisis being used as an excuse for witch hunts. And people may say, oh, well, we're not burning anyone at the stake. We're not, doing anything like that. But, well, give it time. Hopefully not. But it is very interesting that you still have this sort of intellectual witch hunt happening among the academic circles, where you have a lot of, professors and scientists who have had to either leave their professions or had to, basically, bend the knee or say, you know what, I'm done with this and I'm going to go speak my mind elsewhere and I don't need this grant money anymore. It just feels like this intellectual bullying around this changing narrative, and that ultimately the goal of all of this is more control, right? That's what it comes down to, is being able to increase the amount of control that government and institutions have on individuals, to say, like you said, you can't eat that meat. You can't drive this kind of car. You can't fly in a plane that often. We can only fly in private jets when we go to our climate conferences. That's the only time you're allowed to do that. But it also feels like at the same time, people are kind of beginning to push back more because there is so much access to information. They can't control that informational funnel. The information's just out there. And so enough free-thinking people will say, hey, something seems fishy here. I don't buy this. And also, why is it just us, us plebs that are needing to change everything about the way we do? Meanwhile, all of you in your ivory towers are still just going about your business as if nothing was actually the matter. Is there really a crisis here, or are you just trying to tell me what to do? And that gives me a little hope that people seem to be waking up. Not just here, but certain viruses that shall not be named. Money itself. People are questioning these things, and they're pushing back against these narratives that have been shoved down their throats for so long that they're just kind of sick of it. And they're saying, you know what? I'm not buying this anymore. Is that the feeling you're getting, kind of this, like we're having a bit of it feels like a changing time right now where people are not as willing to just drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak, from the government and from the intellectuals?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. That what the elites want, they went for the Great Reset, and what they got was the Great Awakening. I think that is what happened. And I've had a lot of people come up to me personally in real life and online saying that I believed in this stuff. I believed in the climate scam until this virus thing came through. And that woke me up because I found out we were being lied to over and over there. So then I looked around and said, what else are they lying to us about? And the answer is just about everything. I think that story's been repeated over and over, and that makes me really happy. One thing also is that I've been on X and online looking at the replies for close to 20 years now. And there was a time when I felt way more alone than now. It seemed like almost everybody was into it. But now it makes me so happy as people put crazy claims up on X. You see person after person saying, this is wrong, this is why it's wrong. And tons of people I've never heard of are really pushing back, and they're taking an active role. I think it's great that so many people are pushing back personally, because it's so important to push back. If we just let them roll over us and implement the CBDC based on this scam, it's going to make our lives so much worse. So it makes me happy that so many people are pushing back. I also wanted to go back and talk about what you said about the witch hunts, because the number I heard is 50,000 witches were burned. And again, this whole idea that bad weather is caused by people that you don't like, that for sure it happened then. And I'm hearing that the academic elites were in favor of this back then, that the witch hunts, yep, good idea. It's pretty amazing. But going way back, I think that maybe the Aztecs were blaming when there were droughts that they would cut people's hearts out. And it happened quite a bit in history. And one thing about that is it worked. Because there's bad weather, there's a period of bad weather, whatever you do, it's eventually going to go away. And you can say, hey, we did these sacrifices and now it rained again. So you're welcome. And I think there might be something like that going on here, that when the climate crisis, whatever, the weather never does get worse, the Al Gore types will say, hey, you're welcome again. It would have been way worse if we wouldn't have done that stuff, or wouldn't if we didn't give money to climate scammers, we would have had the apocalypse, but we didn't. So yeah, I think that it may play out that way. I don't know.
Well, I think it's a fairly safe bet to say that if their predictions don't come true, they will be patting themselves on the back, even though they had nothing to do with it. But I want to get into CBDCs a little bit, because I think this is such a central part of this larger narrative. And CBDs, central bank digital currencies, obviously evolved as a response to Bitcoin being in this world. This is a direct response, I think, to that, and a realization that, wow, here's this freedom money, this money that promotes individual sovereignty that no one can control. But what if we took just a little bit of that and stripped out all the freedom and stripped out all the decentralization and all the sovereignty benefits, and we just used it to control people? Now, wouldn't that be swell? And now you see this. There's that guy, Michael Evans. This was in Davos in 2022. There's that clip of him. Carla's used it in a few of the videos that we've put together. But he talks about individual carbon footprint trackers. And literally he says, where are they traveling? How are they traveling? Yeah. What are they eating? And he's so gleeful. He's like, we can control all of this. We'll know all of it. And then we can stop them from spending their credits, their coupons, their CBDC coupons on anything we don't like. Isn't that marvelous? And you hear a guy talk like that and talk about it in such a gleeful way. And it's like, oh my God, some of these people are just genuinely sick. They genuinely think these unwashed masses cannot possibly know what's good for them. So we have to tell them what's good for them. And the only way that we can tell them and make sure they follow through is if we control their money. And so I'm curious kind of how you, as someone who's been watching this space for a lot longer, do you see CBDCs coming into the picture now as just kind of a natural evolution of this? Like, of course, they weren't going to be able to control people enough, so they needed to actually go and control the money if they were going to make any of these lofty, 20, 30, 50-year plans actually work in quotes, I should say.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think they actually see themselves as they're better than us, the unwashed. They understand this climate crisis, and us little people, we're too stupid. So for our own good, they have to control us. I do think that's how delusional they are. But I can't believe that guy. I saw that same clip, I think, today, that he's all gleeful about it. He thinks that normal people are going to watch that and think, yeah, hooray for you. Thank you for controlling me, because I know that you know better than I do. I don't know. Does he not actually speak to real people in real life? Do they live in a cocoon where they think that this is going to go over well? It's amazing. I don't know how out of touch a guy can be, but that blows my mind that he would do that.
Well, same here. I think sometimes they forget that they're on camera and that they think that they're actually just talking to a room of their intellectual and anointed peers, and so they can just actually speak their mind, and then they forget that this goes out on the internet where anyone can find it and can make nice little clips of it, taking the absolute most insane things that you say and putting them together in a digestible couple-minute video. And it turns out that normal people don't like it when you say, we're going to control every aspect of a person's life, and we're going to do it by controlling their money. And we're going to create a coupon that expires if you don't spend it fast enough. and a coupon that only works for certain things. And it surely does not work for meat, because meat is bad, of course. But we're still going to eat meat because we won't tell you this, but meat is really good for you. But it's bad for you. You shouldn't eat meat. Eat our Soylent Green, eat our, Impossible Burgers, and just, be a good little serf and do as you're told. And then you'll be, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy and everything will be just fine. But it's insane. And normal people do not look at this and say, oh yeah, that sounds good. Okay. Yep. I'll comply. I think some people perhaps do, but I think the majority of people say, no, fuck that. You're not going to tell me how to live my life, and I sure as hell don't want you controlling my money. At least that's my feeling of it. Maybe I'm around too many Bitcoiners, though. Who knows?
No, one thing that it puzzles me about the climate cult, it is a cult, but it is a cult where even the believers can't be bothered to behave as if they actually believe it. Just over and over, you pointed out the whole hypocrisy thing, that if I actually believe that CO2 might kill my beloved children, and if I fly in a plane, it's going to kill my kids, I would not fly in a plane. But they still do it. If you look into like Al Gore in his book says you're supposed to accomplish your long-haul travel via bus. We're supposed to ride in buses across the country. So when's the last time that Al took a bus across the country? Or we're supposed to not use our dryer. That uses too much energy. You have to line dry your clothes. I mean, we used to do that in the old days, but it's a lot more convenient. And when's the last time Al went out and line dried his own clothes? So it's all about pushing this stuff onto the little people. And then I think even John Kerry was saying that he can use private jets because whatever he's doing is so important that it's worthwhile, and whatever you're doing is not important enough, so you got to walk or whatever. It's just amazing that I don't know how deep their belief really is if they can't make the sacrifices themselves. That part puzzles me. So.
No, I couldn't agree more. And one thing that I always look at is it's like, okay, if you really care about this, first of all, why aren't you composting? Like every person who either pretends or really does care about this, why aren't you personally composting? Why do you still have a lawn with a uniform crop of grass on it? Why do you not have a prairie garden? Why are you not promoting regenerative agriculture? Why are you not supporting small farmers? Why are you instead lobbying for more control and more regulations on those small farmers in favor of the giant farming corporations? All of these things that you're doing are antithetical to anybody who actually gives a shit about what you say you give a shit about. And that's the thing. That's like the hypocrisy is not masked very well. Like the mask seems to be off. And I think at this point, a lot of these people maybe have been in power for so long that they've forgotten that the game has changed. They've forgotten that the informational genie is out of the bottle, that the internet exists, that social media exists, that decentralized social media platforms and communication protocols, protocol, like Nostr exists. They can't control the narrative like they once could, but they still operate as though they can. And they operate as though they will be able to continue to govern without the actual consent of the governed indefinitely as long as they want, and then they'll be able to, retire to one of their 12 mansions and life will be nice and peachy. I think that there is a reckoning coming because you can only push people so far. And when you start messing with people's money, you start messing with their food. And when you start messing with people's food, that's when revolutions happen. And this is a tale as old as time. And so it just feels like we're reaching this point, I think, around the world. I mean, you've seen all of the farmer protests across the globe, which I think are great. Yes. And those can't just be swept under the rug, mostly because when you have, several thousand tractors rolling down the highway, it's a little hard to hide that. But also because there's videos of those that are taken by thousands of individuals that are shared thousands, hundreds of thousands of times and viewed millions, tens of millions, billions of times. You can't make that disappear. You can't, maybe you can try to memory hole it, but that's only going to work for so long. And I think, again, I feel that we're at this point where people are sick and tired of being fed the same bullshit by the government and the complicit media, and they don't trust either one of them. And they know that the intellectuals are not all of them. There are many great intellectuals out there who are actually doing the work of an intellectual and of an academic. So I don't want to cast that too wide of a blanket there. But a large part of the academic institutions are captured, and they know that too. And it feels like we're at this point where too many people have woken up. They've been unplugged, and they won't go back in that pod. They refuse to. And so that gives me some hope about the future, because enough people have said, no, I'm not buying it. I'm not putting up with it. And I don't want any part of it.
Yes, that makes me think of the thing. It made Tucker last night or very recently said that American people are not going to take this anymore, and Dad's home, and we're not going to. I don't know if you saw that quote.
I didn't see it. No,
we're not going to take it anymore. Yeah, I think that's an important quote, because I think we're not going to take it anymore. And in terms of social media, I wanted to mention the whole Joe Rogan, the way he flipped on climate change. I think it was in 2018. He had Candace Owens on there, and she basically said she didn't believe in the climate scam, and he couldn't believe it, that what people are lying to us. That he was on the alarmist side in 2018. But he's definitely flipped, and as it comes up on his pods now, he scoffs at it. And one great thing with his huge audience, he had Stephen Koonin on there, who was on our side, on the side of realism, and he had Andrew Dessler on there. He gave them both maybe an hour plus. And I just love the fact that in this new media, it's not just a 1 minute soundbite or whatever against another 1 minute. He had them both on there and let them all just lay out their case. And I think that's just wonderful that a huge audience is just hearing both sides, and they can think about it for themselves and make their own decisions. I think it's super healthy. And CNN, you were never going to see that on CNN. So very healthy there. In terms of the farmer thing, I wanted to bring up Jasper Machogu, a farmer from Kenya. Have you heard that name at all? He's one of my favorite people. He is a guy, he's in his late 20s, I think, and he's on Substack and on X. And he was a believer in this whole climate scam, he admits. He was a kind of a Greenpeace guy. And then he read a book by Patrick Moore that exposed the whole thing. And he flipped over to the side of realism. So now he's a guy living in Kenya. He's a small farmer. And for hours each day, he's farming with a hoe and working hard as he calls himself a peasant farmer. And the other part of the day, he's on X and he's on Substack putting up brilliant stuff. He knows all the data. He knows how much fertilizer is used per country, and he knows details about climate and weather. Very smart guy. It's just very interesting that a small farmer like that, is able to get onto social media and have a big influence. He's got a lot of followers. He's had viral videos that have been retweeted by big dogs, and it just makes me happy just in the last couple of years that he's kind of come to the forefront. And I think there's a lot of stories like that, again, with this whole great awakening. It's for sure it's happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of decentralized media in general, is that you can't. I've referred to Noster specifically as a hydra before from Greek mythology. You cut off one head, two come in its place. But I think more broadly, whether they be podcasts or YouTube channels, I mean, YouTube can shut you down fairly easily. But it's harder to when you have so many people all producing content, and maybe you're hosting that content yourself. Maybe it's on your own website. And you're able to do that, whatever it may be. There are too many voices for them all to be silenced. And so that's where I think CBDCs also end up coming in, though, because they're realizing maybe they're starting to realize, this whole, free information just being out there and open has gotten a little bit out of control. Maybe we need some more levers to be able to pull. And I'm kind of curious do you think that CBDCs end up being foisted on people more from the position of the kind of the climate alarmism narrative? Do you think it comes from, this is actually just more convenient? I mean, we saw what happened in Nigeria with the e-Naira. People just rejected it. They had I think like 2%, uptick in the usage. It was incredibly low because people just didn't trust it, didn't want it. But they're not going to stop this. Most countries in the world have CBDC pilots or launch CBDCs, but most are in various stages of pilots. Where do you think this goes? Do you think that they end up just not being able to get the public support? But even so, do they care if they have public support to push this on people? I mean, I kind of don't think they do. I think they're going to push it, but I'm curious what you think their next kind of move is to be able to get this technology, this totalitarian technology, out into the public sphere and try to normalize it. Like, does it come from that climate narrative of, if you don't use this and we can't track everything you do, everyone's going to die because the planet's going to explode?
Yeah, I've asked other people about this on my podcast, and I've heard that they've kind of gone all in on the climate crisis. This is the thing that they're going to try to use. That's the basis, and they don't really have a backup plan. I don't know what the next reason would be if it, I don't know, maybe it's health reasons or something. But I do think they're going to try it. I can't imagine that the people in the U.S. will stand for it. I just can't imagine that people are going to say, okay, I guess I can't buy the meat I wanted to buy. I think because of the Second Amendment. I think that's a big part of it in the U.S., that we're not going to stand for this. Maybe if we were unarmed, that they could force this down our throats, but ultimately they're not going to be able to do it. But that doesn't mean we can just sit back and let them try. I think we should fight every tooth and nail. I think we should fight it all the time, everywhere we can. Not just the CBDC, but I think we should fight the climate scam. When people bring it up at Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, your tendency is to sit back and not be that guy. But I think we should be that guy. I think whenever it comes up, I think we should say, this is bullshit, this is why it's bullshit, and we're not going to take it anymore. I think it's important.
No, I do too. I mean, if you as an individual do not speak up and somehow expect others to, or expect the people who you would be speaking up against to just change their minds, it's not going to happen. Like it does start with you. It starts with one person being willing to be the bad guy for a little while, but to speak the truth and to maybe make things a little bit uncomfortable. But you know what? Being uncomfortable is how people get better and smarter and change in a positive way.
Can I bring up this name? Do you know Doc Malik from the UK? Doc Malik,
Yeah.
He's a guy, he is a hero, I would say. He is a hero. He had a great job as a surgeon, and he was seeing this crazy stuff happening, and he had the courage to just say, not on my watch. He just spoke out publicly against it. He got enormous amounts of flack, and he ended up losing his job, but he's a total hero, and he said, other people say, you can speak up, but I couldn't do it. I would lose my job or whatever. And he's saying, well, look at me. I lost my job. I think we need more people like that. I think a lot of us don't have that much to risk, and still we're not speaking out. But I think we should use those people. They are heroes, and we should follow their lead and not just make them do all the work. I think all of us should do as much of that work as we can, because there's so many of us, actually. Ultimately, there's so many of us and so few of these elites. It's really just a tiny percentage of people that are trying to shove this down our throats. We far outnumber them. And the people with real jobs, I mean, a lot of this whole thing, this climate scam, is siphoning wealth and freedom away from real people with real jobs. I think we have to all of us who have worked in the real world and want a better future for our kids. It really is that important to fight back hard.
Yeah, amen. And it is one of the reasons that I think, to go back to your point about the Second Amendment, it is very important in America that we have that. And that is why, in my opinion, America will remain the last bastion of freedom, even as the rest of the world has gone to shit. Even though America at times seems as though it's going in a bad direction, we do have those constitutional backstops, and there are so many guns in America. And that genuinely makes a difference, because it's that last line of defense to say, come and take it. Like, go ahead. Like, you can only push people so far. I think people also forget that the majority of mostly men, but some women as well, in the service, in the armed services, they are not New York City trust fund babies. They are, from small towns like I grew up in, knew a lot of folks who went in the service. And I think you're going to have a really hard time mobilizing the armed services in any meaningful way against the American people. And that's, even if the American people were not armed to the teeth. But I think that the other part of that, though, is, again, to bring it back to CBDCs, they know that so many things are outside of their control. The ability to speak and publish freely and to speak the truth in the digital public square, the ability to carry a weapon. But what they can control, they can't control any of those other things right now. But if they have even more control of the money, if they have the ability to say, nope, we're able to, you can't pay for your internet because we just, your internet coupon CBDC was revoked. You're not buying any ammunition because we got rid of cash 5 years ago, and the only way you can buy it is with a central bank digital currency. And sorry, but that's not on the approved list of items that you can purchase. And that's why I'm so grateful Bitcoin exists, because ultimately the freedom of speech, the right to acquire and then bear arms, all of that can be subverted if they have complete control of the money, because you need money for everything you want to do. And, I'm curious, as you've started kind of going down this Bitcoin journey, how have you seen these, did you see Bitcoin kind of fit in naturally as a form of, let's say, monetary protest, let's say, against some of these authoritarian overreaches that are, foisted upon people under the guise of climate? Did you, how far deep down the Bitcoin energy abundance rabbit hole are you too, I guess I should ask?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that is why Marty Bent and Safety had me on their pods in the first place, is that so many people are using the climate scam to push against Bitcoin or attack Bitcoin because, oh no, we can't let Bitcoin happen because it uses energy, and using energy causes bad weather, so therefore no Bitcoin for the people. I think that is so crazy, and there are some good videos about this, about how it's interesting that just Bitcoin gets attacked for using energy, like Christmas lights and just the financial system we have in place right now, the central banking and the insurance industry, et cetera. I've seen estimates saying that Bitcoin mining is using just a tiny fraction of what the current system is using. So no one is saying that, oh, let's shut down our credit cards because it's using too much energy. That causes bad weather. But Bitcoin, and there's so many people, it seems to me, in the Bitcoin community that are all apologetic and saying, oh, we're going to use renewable energy. We realize that Bitcoin causes bad weather, but it doesn't cause a lot of bad weather. I do think that we shouldn't go that route. We should just don't apologize for it. It uses energy, and a lot of things use energy, and it's worth it. There's just the pharmaceutical industry, or that uses, and healthcare, enormous amounts of energy. And again, they don't have to apologize for using their energy. They just use it because using energy, there's a huge correlation between energy use and human well-being. Alex Epstein does a great job of talking about that countries that use a lot of energy, they have better lives in general. And if you're Jasper, again, he's living in Kenya, and his family, they have enough electricity just to charge their phones and have maybe a few lights in their house, and that's it. They got no refrigerator. They don't have an electric car. They don't have a real car. And until recently, when they were harvesting their corn, they were putting it on their back and carrying it a kilometer to where they had to sell it or whatever. And it's a huge upgrade for them to have maybe mopeds or small motorcycles, and they can use that to haul their corn. So anyway, this whole idea that we need to clamp down on energy use because it causes bad weather and Bitcoin causes bad weather, none of that makes sense. Energy use is a good thing. We shouldn't waste the energy, but it's important for human well-being and human flourishing to have that. And again, Jasper is a very good, he's an advocate for the well-being of people in Africa. A lot of do-gooders over here, they want to throttle down the energy use in Africa, do them a favor because that's going to prevent droughts later. So they should just try to power their whole economy on wind and solar. And I think wind and solar is kind of like fiat money. It's fiat energy that it doesn't, in most cases, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And there's supposed to be this deal where if wind and solar didn't prevent the blackout now, the answer is more wind and solar. But that's not, it's not. Wind and solar, they're never going to provide baseload power. You have to have real power that's there when you need it. It's somebody else has said that how much would you pay for a car that works only an unpredictable 1/3 of the time? That's kind of what you're buying when you're buying wind power. It's there sometimes, and when you want it, it's not there. So how much is that worth? So I forget what the original question was, but
no. There's a couple interesting points there. One is just about like human flourishing in general. There's a great chart that Alex Gladstein has talked about many times, which is basically GDP versus energy usage. And his point is there are no rich countries that do not use a lot of energy. It does not exist. It is literally not possible. There is a correlation between how much energy you use and how wealthy and well off your country is and your people are. That is undeniable. And then to your point about kind of pushing these different climate projects on countries in Africa or South America, so much of that too comes back to the money, because it's organizations like the IMF and the World Bank who engage in monetary colonialism, and those organizations use they use debt, big old debt packages, but we're not going to give you those sweet US dollars unless you agree to our development agenda. and to do these certain things. And usually it involves a devaluation of the currency if there is a local currency, if they're not dollarized. It involves, you can only spend the money on this and this and this thing. It involves whoever is in charge, if that is a corrupt country, just taking a bunch of that money and putting it in a Cayman, or Swiss bank account somewhere and, or building another mansion for themselves. It's all just absurd. And it's kind of this ridiculous thing where we say that, oh, well, yeah, we in the, quote, developed world, we can still use fossil fuels, but you in the third world, you cannot use these things, which were literally the only reason that we were able to become a developed country in the first place. And it's just insane. And it's so kind of patronizing too.
Yeah.
To say, like, again, it's we know better than you. You poor undeveloped country. Let us come in and give you some blood money and tell you how to run things. And it's like, has any country ever been better off after the IMF and the World Bank got there? I think you would struggle to find an example of that. They have become perpetual debt slaves for all time. Like, that's not going away. Maybe El Salvador is the first country who may be able to get out from under the boot of the IMF. And that's also thanks to Bitcoin and thanks to the fact that they're not buying this crap. And well, I'll pause there for a second, but then I had another thing I wanted to bring up just about free market incentives and wind and solar. But I'll pause there for a moment.
All right, I just have two things here. Martin Durkin, who I worked with in the most recent Climate, the movie, he did this great movie in 2007, The Great Global Warming Swindle, and he had one story in there. He went to an African clinic where they were trying to run this African clinic just on solar panels. So they had a refrigerator there and lights. They could either have their lights on or they could run the refrigerator, but not both at the same time. They had to make a choice. And I'm wondering how many people would want their loved one in the U.S. Going to a clinic where the energy was limited in that way. You want a clinic, you want hospitals that have real forms of energy, whether you're in Africa or not. So this whole idea, like you said, I think it's just terrible that you think you're doing a good thing for the Africans or for developing countries by choking off the supply of real energy. It's just a terrible thing. Then the other thing I wanted to mention is, I don't know if you've seen this C40 cities document. There's, I think,
no.
It was supposed to be 40 cities. I think it went up to 99 cities. A lot of major cities around the world, their mayors signed on to this document. It's still online as of a week or two ago. It's one of the craziest things I've seen because they had goals in there that, for example, they were going to try to limit us to 3 new pieces of clothing per year per person. That's it. This is for climate reasons. If you want to buy that 4th piece of clothing, no, you got to wait till next year because it's going to cause too much bad weather. And no meat. By 2030, you don't get to eat any meat and no dairy. And I don't know, maybe it was one flight, but completely crazy. It still is online that they were going to try to restrict our lives, and they seriously think that we're going to accept those restrictions. That how many people would say, okay, I'm not going to buy that 4th piece of clothing because the mayors signed on to this thing saying that it's not the right thing to do. It's pretty crazy. Again, I think it just shows just how far out of touch these alleged elites are. It's amazing. Amazing.
It is. I'm trying to share this screen. Is this the document? Urban Climate Action Impacts Framework?
It might be. You can look for clothing down there. I've posted it on Twitter a few times. It looks like that.
Okay, I might have the wrong one here. I'll check your Twitter for that so I can link this in the show notes as well. But I mean, that's the thing that people. It's so funny to me because so many of the things that we're talking about, if somebody just hops into this conversation, here's a snippet of this, they think, what a bunch of raging lunatic conspiracy theorists. They're just making all this stuff up. But people don't realize that there is source material out there. This isn't people. We're not making this stuff up. We're not pulling it out of our ass. This is based on actual source material that they put out there on their actual agendas, what they want to achieve. This isn't fantasy. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is, in fact, a conspiracy. It's not a theory. But it's just mind-blowing. And like I'm going to have to, you said, so C40 and then...
I might be able to find it here.
Yeah, if you can pull that up. Because I'm curious about that. And so much of this stuff, again, I have to come back to control. Like it all comes back to government has gotten too big because we print too much money to fund ever-expanding deficits that they will never pay, they will never shrink, they will never pay down, they will never, the money printer doesn't never turns off once it's been turned on. It may pause for a sec, but it never turns off. And the only way, like you mentioned that $40 trillion number earlier, the only way that we can possibly save ourselves is if we print ungodly amounts of money, devalue the currency, drive monetary inflation through the roof, make everything cost more, and then make everything that you actually want cost way more, because we're going to make it, not good. We're going to give it that bad label of, we don't want you eating that, we don't want you driving that, we don't want you reading that, whatever it may be. It all comes back to, we have too big of governments and supranational organizations as well that are, like the IMF and the World Bank, the BIS, among others. You kind of have to wonder, I wonder all the time, are the people that are in these organizations just part of something that's so big that they cannot control it and it kind of steers itself because there's this, loose consensus that they have about, here's what we need to do to be good people and good stewards of the poor, dumb people? Or is there actually a lot of malintent behind this? I go back and forth on this, so I'm curious what your thought is. When you see all these different agendas, these UN plans, these Davos WEF plans, these IMF structural adjustments, when you see all of this, do you attribute it more to just, well, they're just kind of part of their cogs in a wheel and they don't know how to do anything else? Or do you think there's actually maliciousness and malintent from a large number?
I've thought about that a lot, and I'm wondering if, tens of thousands of people go to these UN climate conferences, that they're there for 2 weeks. I don't know if it's a lot of partying or what they're doing, but I do think a lot of them honestly believe that someone else has proved there's a climate crisis and they're really important, and they're going to these meetings and they're talking over all these plans. I think they see themselves as heroes. I think a lot of them do see themselves as heroes. Even maybe Al Gore, when he gets up in the morning, he doesn't think, I'm a scammer and of course this stuff is all bullshit. I think he's fooled himself into believing this stuff. That'd be my guess. But I don't know these people personally. Maybe you know some of them personally, but I don't know.
Fortunately, I do not know. I don't have too many connections at the UN or at Davos. I think, maybe I'll have to make some inroads there, go deep undercover or something. But
I can for sure tell, though. I have talked to a lot of climate scientists and warmists in general on Twitter, and some of them in real life. And you can find out right away that they have not, almost none of them have spent 10 minutes looking into what could this be wrong. They're just, of course it's right. You're evil if you don't believe in it. You hate kids. You're paid by big oil, blah, blah, blah. But if they did look at it with an open mind at all, if they looked into crop yields, like I said, if they go down any rabbit hole with an open mind, they'll find out it's all a crock. But they don't take that step. They just think somebody else, some nameless other people, some really smart people have proved that there's a climate crisis. And then they save themselves the tough work of actually trying to think about it for themselves. I do think that groupthink is a huge portion of this whole thing, but not all of it.
I agree, and you slight tangent here, but you mentioned the assumption that you must be paid, you're a paid shill for big oil. Was it not big oil that funded the anti-nuclear energy campaigns back in the day? Didn't they kickstart? I mean, through various Green and Greenpeace organizations, didn't they provide a lot of that initial anti-nuclear energy propaganda?
I've heard that. I don't know what the answer is to that, but it would not surprise me at all. So yeah. I think there's a lot of that where people are secretly funding whatever the competition is. Yeah.
Well, and
tax on
the oil companies for sure did create the idea of recycling so that they could get more plastic bottles out there. That I'm fairly certain of, and I'm not just spewing misinformation here. But the point being that even these people who think that they're the nuclear energy one is just such an obvious one to me, where you have so many people who are supposed, advocates for the climate, for the world, for the future, and yet they're against nuclear energy. You look at Germany shutting down their last nuclear power plants. You look at the fact that we built 2 in the past 50 years in America? We have this incredible technology that allows us to harness basically limitless energy and clean energy that everybody should be able to be in favor of. And yet the propaganda campaign against it has been so fierce that people genuinely believe oh no, nuclear is bad. We won't consider that to be a clean energy. And I just think it's mind blowing. And it's sad because you can imagine how much more human flourishing there would be now if we had small modular nuclear reactors developed that were deployed all across the developing world. It wouldn't be developing anymore. It would be developed, and I just find that sad that so much of this propaganda ends up genuinely preventing human flourishing because, in the example of nuclear, it stops that development from happening. It stops that from being funded. You don't get the permits and whatever, all the other hoops you have to jump through. And I think sort of similar tactics have been used against Bitcoin, where they want to nip that in the bud. But there's people like Daniel Batten doing really great research out there who've basically just gone through and debunked every one of these claims and done so very publicly, and have now made it their mission to say, no, we are just not going to accept your lies anymore. We're not going to do it. We're done with that. Here are the facts. Anything you say to the contrary is a immediately disprovable lie. That's a good thing, at least.
Yeah, Daniel Batten himself, I think that he has said stuff like, I don't have friends who are climate deniers. So I think he's buying into that portion of this. He's buying into the climate crisis part. But am I right?
I've talked to Daniel. Yeah. I know, so the way he, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but having talked to him at some length, he came on the show because right now he has a firm that is raising money specifically to harness vented methane from landfills and to mine Bitcoin with it. Like something that literally, even the craziest deluded person could not be against that, right? Like you're literally taking trash and you're turning it into treasure, and this trash vents methane into the atmosphere. Nobody wants a bunch of methane out there. That's actually a worrisome thing. But you can literally just set it on fire, hook up a generator, and turn it into Bitcoin, and that's incredible. What he has talked to me about is, I think he is honestly someone who believes in the free market and wants to be able to incentivize the build out of renewable energy sources as long as it is through means that are not dictated by government subsidies. Because that's where you have, anytime there are subsidies, you have market distortions, right? And that's my thing too. If the free market decides that it is more profitable and more efficient to build out solar and wind farms in a particular area for a particular use case, by all means. What I have problems with at a principled level is subsidizing any of this stuff, because I think subsidies, again, always create market distortions. And that's why you have massive overbuilds of wind and solar, and then you still, and with trillions of dollars spent, and you still have blackouts happening, like California being an example of that. I think Texas is kind of threading that needle pretty well, where they're like, no, we're gonna keep drilling, we're gonna keep using fossil fuels. We're going to have wind and solar as well, but that's not going to be relied on for our baseload energy, because obviously it can't be our baseload energy, And so that there's at least, I think, a lot of realism coming out of Texas, and hopefully a little bit more of the free market deciding, yeah, this is what actually makes sense right now.
Yeah, Warren Buffett admitted that the only reason to put up the wind turbines, Berkshire Hathaway is heavily into wind power. The only reason is the tax breaks, or basically the subsidies. Yep. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense. So that's just a terrible misallocation of taking money from working people and effectively giving it to Warren Buffett to do this stupid thing that doesn't make any sense. I think I agree that we have to cut back on those subsidies, or cut them off completely. And then I'm here in Minnesota. We're above the 45th latitude. It makes no sense to put up solar panels over farmland, putting up solar panels over farmland and then letting them sit there in the wintertime covered with snow. Just the only reason people do that, they're farming the subsidies. They're not, the solar power doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So yeah, I would like to see politicians just attack this stuff and get rid of it. We need some, hopefully sanity will return, but I haven't seen much of it lately yet, politically.
Yeah, sadly. That's the thing, is that it seems that no matter who is in power, subsidies are just like a way of doing business, and that, I think that's just so sad, because we have so many examples throughout history of government intervention in the market, specifically subsidizing things or trying to control the prices of other things. That just doesn't end well. It's a market distortion. It misallocates capital. And, you are not going to be smarter than the free market. No small group of people is going to be smarter than the free market. And I think that's, again, we come back to what we started with, which is the hubris of people. The hubris of people in control to think that they can exert control, be smarter than a bunch of individuals deciding what is best for them, what is most profitable for them, what leads to most human flourishing for them.
that is always going to be better and more efficient in the long run. And I hope we get back to a little bit more of that sanity. But kind of speaking of a little, go ahead.
Just another thing along those lines is the whole ethanol thing. This whole idea that we have all these cornfields, all this ethanol, and does it make sense to be burning our food for fuel after we put all this fossil energy in there to grow the corn? So I would like to see that cut back. And I think a lot of that was, I think Gore admitted that a big reason he was in favor of it because there's a primary in Iowa. He wanted to make the Iowa farmers happy by giving them money. Again, a great misallocation of money and not good for the environment to grow corn for no good reason. If you're growing it for food, I'm fine with it, but for a stupid reason, let's not do it. So yeah,
well, and look at where that overproduction of corn started in the first place. It happened during the Nixon era when they decided that they were going to subsidize the heck out of people growing corn. And then this also comes, you got a lot of not so great oils that came out of that. You have a massive overproduction, again, a market distortion. This leads to massive overproduction of ethanol, which is a self-fulfilling doom loop of producing more and more corn that is not at all being used for human consumption, but is instead being used to produce, various lubricants and then also, E85 ethanol or whatever it was. It's insane to me. And again, it comes back to people thinking that they are smarter than the free market and thinking that, if we just subsidize this, we'll get the desired result. And there couldn't possibly be any second or third or fourth or fifth order effects. Like it's not only hubris, but it's just incredibly short-term thinking. Like it's actually mind-blowing how just incredibly short-sighted it is.
Yeah, I mean, we're supposed to prevent bad weather in 2075 by using ethanol, but how many small engines were ruined by the ethanol? I've heard of people pulling out their hair, people working on the engines. They didn't work. I don't know if it's gotten any better, but I think it destroyed enormous amounts of engines. I don't know how much politicians care about that. I think not much, but it's pretty sad, that part of it.
No, I agree, and I want to switch gears a little bit because we're talking about a lot of insanity and hubris, right? And I think one of the areas where it's a rabbit hole I've started going down a bit more here, also a bit thanks to Efrat prodding me in that direction. We're giving her lots of shout outs today, and they're well deserved because she's awesome.
Absolutely, she is awesome.
But the geoengineering idea, where this seems to be something that maybe a few years ago, if you suggested that these kind of things were happening, it would have been very hard to find a lot of evidence to back up your claim. You could find some, but not a lot. Now it seems that we're reaching the stage where companies and governments are admitting that they are doing this and pretending like, we never tried to hide this and it's all good. And no, it's really helping things and it has no bad consequences whatsoever. And trust me, we are smart enough to handle this. I think you're much deeper down that rabbit hole than I am. Can you educate me and maybe anyone listening who is not familiar with what this means or thinks that geoengineering is still just kind of again some conspiracy theory?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that we're supposed to think that any time that a plane's flying over, that if we see a contrail, for sure it's just water vapor. You're a conspiracy theorist if you think it's something else. But then there's all these mainstream articles saying that in, I don't know where it was, in the Middle East, there was like 240 official flights where they were trying to increase the amount of rain by spraying chemicals from a plane into the sky. And there's companies that have been doing this for years, for decades. They've been doing it. They did it in the Vietnam War. They were spraying stuff to change the weather. So the whole idea that there's no planes up there trying to change the weather by spraying chemicals, not true. For sure, it's happening. I don't know how much of it's happening. I don't know how widespread it is. I don't know what they can do in terms of hurricanes. What can they do? I don't know. But the whole idea that we should just think the whole thing is a conspiracy theory and you're stupid to think if planes are spraying stuff up there, for sure they are, because there's been as you said, so much admission that has been happening. And I think it shouldn't be happening because, again, there's the unintended consequences. And we don't know. Some people say that major floods have been caused. I think there was a case in the 1950s in England where there was they had maybe 100 times the normal amount of rain because they overdid it. I think, of course, if they try this stuff, they are going to overdo it. So I think they should be super careful. And again, the whole idea of blotting out the sun to try to prevent the planet from warming by blotting out the sun. There's a reason why it's a plot point in many movies, right? That there's some idiot mad scientist that wants to blot out the sun. And we want to blot out the sun, and we want to power the world on solar panels, and we want to blot out the sun. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, geoengineering is happening. I need to dig into it further. I think you might be fairly far along yourself compared to me. I'm only a few months into it. Don't know. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned some of these floods. I believe you remember those really big, those like quite devastating floods they had in Dubai.
Yes, those are the ones. Yeah.
Yep, and I mean Dubai is very public about all the cloud seeding they're doing. Like they're very public about it. They're like, look at we've figured out how to make this inhospitable, unlivable environment in the desert livable, and we're seeding the clouds, and we have our shiny city on the hill. And again, we're so smart. And then it's like, oh shoot, we overdid it a little. We just caused I don't know how much property damage, but I'm sure an insane amount, because that's some pretty high quality property that has been built up around there. But again, this comes back to hubris and people thinking that, yes, we can control this. We can make the most unlivable places livable. And there is some truth to that, because the more energy you're able to harness, you can quite literally, drain the swamps and pump water out and make places that humans probably have never lived before fairly livable. But I think that a lot of this gets taken too far. And that's where so much this destruction happens, because you end up getting just a bunch of people who think they're doing something good and they're following orders and whatever else. And yeah, we're doing important stuff. But then they don't actually have any idea. They don't think past the first order consequences. I think that's really a theme. This is going to help increase rainfall. We should do it. This is going to help, make the planet cooler. We should do it. There's no forward thinking at all. It's all this very high time preference. Here's what I got the money to spend on. I better spend it right now, or I'm not going to get the same budget next year for my little research project. I don't know. I worry that you're going to have either some government decide that just goes way overboard on some of this stuff. And maybe it's the U.S. I don't know. I don't know where we're at in that cycle.
Yeah, I think Daniel Prince was saying that when it rains just enough, if they're cloud seeding and it rains just enough, they're going, yep, you're welcome. We did that. But then if it rains too much, that was natural. It wasn't caused by us. Of course, they're going to deny any negative effects, and they're going to take credit for any positive effects. That's just the way it's going to go for sure. So again, this, as you said, they need to dial it back until they understand it. And we don't understand it. We don't.
Yeah, well, if it rains too much, then it's climate change, right? It's because you're driving a fossil fuel powered car, of course. You greedy bastard.
Yep, it's the fault of people that you don't like. It always is, no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to be conscious of time here, because we've covered a lot of stuff today, and there's a lot more I think we could cover. But I want to ask before I go farther: was there anything that you wanted to get into? Was there anything you wanted to circle back on that maybe we didn't get a chance to dig into enough?
No, I think we covered a lot of stuff here. I think this is really good.
Sure
I
did.
Very much enjoyed it. I can't think of anything. As soon as we hang up, I will, but I have not thought of it.
Well, always. Well, then I want to maybe ask to bring it back to Bitcoin a little bit, because again, I think it's fantastic that you're on this journey. And again, what an introduction to it between Seyfedin and Marty Bent. That's quite a way to come into the Bitcoin scene. But I'm just kind of curious of your thoughts in general on does this provide enough of a bulwark, enough of a barrier against some of this overreach, or at least enough of an escape hatch for us, that even if the governments are pushing these CBDCs, even if they're pushing these anti-human flourishing climate agendas, even if they do all of this, at least we still have a way to escape? Or, I mean, where are you? Maybe let me ask this a different way. Are you optimistic right now about where the future is headed, or pessimistic somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I would say I am optimistic long term. I do think we're going to go through hard times. There's some sort of great reset is still ahead of us, I think. So I think hard times are coming, and I think better times are coming after that. I can't predict exactly how this reset's going to work out. I wish I knew, but yeah, I think hard times are coming, then better times.
Yeah. Well, at least those hard times should have created some good men by then, and women. That gives me a lot of hope. People often think like, oh, what a crazy time we're living in. This is, so much insane stuff is happening. And it's true. But at the same time, you look at all of human history and there's always a lot of crazy stuff happening. We just have so much more exposure to it now because we've got these things in our pockets and we've got 24/7, 365 real-time news from every corner of the globe. And it's like, and maybe things are a bit crazier now, historically speaking. I don't know. I haven't been around that many decades, so I'm not sure. But I'm kind of I'm also very optimistic, and I'm hopeful long term, because at least we have tools that allow us to resist what is being pushed upon us in the form of Bitcoin and strong cryptography and decentralized social media protocols like Nostr. I'm also optimistic because, back to what we talked about earlier, I see I shouldn't say I see it. I feel more of a change happening with people, where it seems to be that more and more people just say, no, I'm not buying it anymore. Like, I'm not buying what you're selling. I'm sick of giving my hard-earned tax dollars to you while you print money out of thin air. I'm sick of buying your bullshit crisis that never materializes in the way you said it will and is just used as an excuse to strip away even more of my rights. And you know what? I just want to, love my family, lead a good life, do something productive with my time. Can you just stop messing with me? That feels to be where a lot of people are at. Like, just leave me the hell alone and let me try to live a good and decent life.
So one thing that honestly gives me hope is the work of you and Carla. It absolutely does. In preparation for this, I've spent a lot of time listening to your stuff and looking at your X feeds, and it really honestly gives me hope because you guys are doing a great job. You've got such a beautiful family. It makes me really happy. Yeah. Yep. It gives me hope for the future. So good times are ahead. They really are.
Bitcoiners, I notice, are having a lot of babies right now, and that's wonderful. That's a good thing. We do not have we don't have a population problem. We have maybe a declining population problem. It's the other side of what they've been telling us for so long. That's another one of those. That's a whole different rabbit hole of how that was, this Malthusian idea that you need to reduce the population because we're going to run out of food and all of this. And again, it's one of these predictions that just doesn't come true and wasn't backed by anything material, but was picked up by the academic elites and by a lot of governments as well. And, that's another thing that gives me hope is the governments and the academic elites who are supporting them, they're not sending their best, because I don't think the best are working with them. You know what I mean? They can't send their best because the best people don't want to be a part of that. That's a good thing.
That's a great point. And if we do start having 1.2 kids per couple, that is going to cause huge, of course, we're going to go extinct. So it's incredibly important that the Bitcoiners have babies.
Yeah, and everyone else too, but at least Bitcoiners seem to be leading the charge.
Especially Bitcoiners.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. A lot of orange-pilled babies coming into the world. But Tom, I want to thank you for your time here. One question and then just a completely unrelated question. Where do you want to send people? I'll link everything in the show notes. I'll link Climate the movie as well in the show notes. I highly recommend people watch it. It's really well done. You guys did an excellent job on that. And just very, very engaging and approachable. But where else do you want to send people? Feel free.
Yeah, just I'm on X at Tom A. Nelson. You can find me there. My link tree is in my profile, so that'll do it.
I'll link that there. I'll link your Nostr as well. Glad I started following you on there now, and here we are live streaming on Nostr. So, yeah, it's what a time to be alive. We've got a lot of tools at our disposal to be able to resist the absurdity of the wannabe totalitarians that would foist a very dark world upon us if we did not have the ability to resist it. So grateful for you as well, and glad I got a chance to meet you here, although not in person. Looking forward to the in-person meeting.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking to you. Appreciate it.
And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. If you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring the Bitcoin Podcast, head to bitcoinpodcast.net/sponsor or send an email to hello@bitcoinpodcast.net. If you are enjoying the Bitcoin podcast and find it valuable, give it a boost on Fountain, a 5-star review wherever you're listening, or better yet, share this show with your network so more people can learn about Bitcoin. Or don't. Bitcoin doesn't care, but I sure do appreciate it. You can grab links in the show notes to watch or listen to this show wherever you get your podcasts, or go to bitcoinpodcast.net/podcast. And you'll also find the links to follow me and the show on Nostr and on X. Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million. But Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time to listen to the Bitcoin podcast. Until next time, stay free.